The grand hall of the Crystal Palace shone like a jewel under countless lanterns. Soft music drifted through the air, blending with the gentle murmur of noble guests. Long tables draped in deep blue cloth held towers of sweet fruits and shining crystal bowls. Golden pillars curved toward the domed ceiling, each carved with ancient symbols of peace. Servants in pale uniforms floated through the aisles, offering cups of warm spiced tea that smelled of cinnamon and honey. Every face in the hall glowed with polite interest as they awaited the Queen's speech. At the dais, Queen Alara stood with her daughter by her side. Alara's robe of silver silk caught every flicker of light, making her look as if she wore the stars themselves. She held a tall glass of wine, lifting it in graceful silence while her eyes swept over the crowd. Whispers rose like soft wings among the lords and ladies. Some spoke of politics, others of trade. But all paused when Alara raised her hand for quiet. The Princess Ariane wore a gown of pale rose that matched the early dawn. Her hair lay in gentle waves down her back, held by a single pearl pin that glowed faintly. Despite her calm smile, her heart fluttered in her chest. She had asked her mother to hold this banquet in honor of a promise, a hope that two worlds could join in friendship. Tonight, she knew, would mark the first step of a new future. As the Queen began her speech, the great double doors swung wide. A hush fell over the guests, and every head turned. A man stood there in simple attire, a dark jacket over a white shirt, trousers that fit well but bore no royal crest. He carried himself with quiet confidence and warmth in his gaze. He seemed almost out of place among the painted faces and golden goblets, yet something in his calm smile drew the eyes of every noble in the room. The stranger took a single step forward. The Queen's words faltered for a breath. The music stilled, and even the candles seemed to lean closer. For a moment, all that could be heard was the slow tapping of a single foot on the marble floor. Then the princess rose from her seat, her cheeks painted with a soft glow of pride. She lifted her hand, and her voice rang clear across the hall. "Your Majesty," Ariane said, her voice steady with joy. "This is the human I married." The words echoed like a sweet bell. A wave of surprise rippled through the gathering. Some guests gasped softly, others exchanged astonished glances. The Queen's brow rose in surprise, and her lips parted as if to speak, eyes now fixed on the human. The princess stepped beside him and took his hand. He bowed with gentle grace, eyes never leaving Ariane's. The crowd leaned forward, eager to see his face. In that moment, the human looked around with earnest kindness, greeting every noble with a small nod. His warmth filled the hall more fully than any chandelier could light it. For the Queen, the world held its breath. She studied this man who had crossed the sea of stars to stand in her palace. She watched how he held himself not with haughty pride, but with humble honor. She saw how Ariane's hand fit in his, how her eyes shone when she looked at him. A slow smile curved on Alara's lips, though her voice remained hidden for now. In the soft glow of candlelight, the palace found itself on the edge of change. Tonight would be remembered as the night two worlds met, not at a battlefield or in cold negotiation, but in a simple act of love. The human's quiet bravery and the princess's joy promised a future beyond the crown's old walls. And as the music began again, the hall filled with the gentle pulse of hearts open to something new. Months before the grand banquet, Princess Ariane found herself aboard a distant research station far from her home world. The station's metal corridors hummed with life support systems and soft machinery sounds. Windows looked out on a gas giant's swirling colors, and tiny stars glittered beyond. Ariane walked carefully in her pale envoy uniform, her heart both eager and heavy. She had come to learn about other cultures and build friendships across the stars. Still, she felt the lonely pull of duty. Every deck she passed reminded her of her royal life's order and expectation. She longed for a friend who saw her not as a princess, but as a person. In one bright lab, a human researcher worked over a console glowing with data streams. He wore a simple jacket over his climate suit, and his eyes shone with focused curiosity. He tapped keys with gentle precision. Ariane paused by the doorway, watching how he moved. She remembered how careful he had been when she first greeted him. He had looked at her without awe or fear, only warmth. She stepped forward and greeted him in his own tongue, pronouncing each word slowly. He turned, surprise and delight in his eyes, and bowed with respect. From that moment, strands of friendship began to weave between two very different lives. They met often in that lab's quiet corner. He showed her how to read his world's data charts and maps. She taught him to trace the ancient symbols of her people, letters that looked like soft petals. Together they discovered common joy in small things, sharing a steaming cup of spiced tea, or pausing to watch the station's night lights shift in color. He played a simple melody on a portable string instrument he carried from Earth. The notes danced in the air, rich and hopeful. Ariane closed her eyes to feel the music, and when she opened them, she saw tears of wonder in his gaze as she described the gardens of her home. One evening, station alert chimed softly for maintenance in the greenhouse module. Vines had begun to wither under a faulty terraforming valve. Ariane hurried beside the human, her slender fingers steady as she tightened a valve while he adjusted the nutrient flow. Together, they coaxed life back into the plants. Each leaf that unfurled felt like a promise. When they finished, they stood side by side among green shoots and fresh blooms. The human laughed softly at the sight of a bright flower opening at last. Ariane laughed too, and in that shared smile, they both felt the spark of deeper connection. In quiet hours, they wandered the station's observation deck to talk about home. He spoke of Earth's oceans and forests, of simple rains and warm sun on his face. She described her palace's dawn gardens, where pearls of dew caught the light, like stars fallen to earth. He listened with gentle awe, and she saw in him a hope that two worlds could learn from one another. They spoke of dreams, hers of peace between distant peoples, his of exploring new frontiers. Each night they parted with a soft promise to meet again, and each dawn they found their way back to one another's side. When the time came for Ariane to return home, they both felt a gentle ache. The station's transport pod waited in the docking bay, its engines humming like a soft lullaby. The human pressed a small silver token into Ariane's palm, a simple band, engraved with two entwined symbols. She clasped it over her heart and smiled through tears. He bowed low, his voice hushed with hope and respect. "For our worlds," he said. She nodded, whispering, "And for our friendship." As the pod's hatch sealed, she turned once more to see him standing beneath the station lights, a single beacon in the dark, that image in her mind. She carried his kindness and their shared memories back to her palace, ready to tell her queen of the humans she had come to love. Palace life unfolded in surprising ways for the human. Each morning, he awoke to soft sunlight streaming through carved stone windows. The walls gleamed with tapestries that told old legends. He had never seen such artistry on Earth. Servants would bow as they offered fresh fruit and warm bread. Now he learned to smile gently and nod to show respect. In return, they warmed him. Still, he felt the weight of royal eyes on his back as he moved through marble halls. Every step was a chance to honor the princess's choice and prove his place here. One day, the court held a tea ceremony in the silver pavilion. The human knelt beside low tables covered in fine silks. The master of ceremony demonstrated how to pour tea without spilling a single drop. When it was the human's turn, his hand shook. Warm liquid spilled over the cup's edge, leaving a small stain on the silk cloth. A hush fell. The human froze, cheeks warming like embers. Then Princess Ariane slipped from her seat and took his hand. She whispered, "It is okay." With her calm beside him, he tried again and lifted the tea gracefully. Soft smiles spread around the pavilion. At the palace gates, he practiced greeting the royal guard. Stood in rows, spears glinting in the morning light. Court etiquette demanded a low bow and steady voice. "Duh." The human bowed too deeply once, almost touching his forehead to the ground. Laughter rippled through the guards, but he straightened quickly, cheeks flushed. Bowed again with careful grace. Princess Ariane watched from the dais, pride shining in her eyes. Afterward, she guided him in the correct posture, They laughed together at his mistakes, turning nerves into shared moments of joy. During formal dinners, the human discovered yet more customs. Each dish was served in precise order. He followed a chart of rules, which fork to use, when to sip soup, how to offer thanks. He listened to court poets recite ancient verses about stars and seas. At first he struggled to understand the meaning, but he asked questions with genuine curiosity. Soon, his thoughtful questions impressed the scholars at the table. They leaned in to explain metaphors he had missed. The human's eagerness to learn warmed the hall more than any flame. Evenings brought music in the moonlit courtyard. Court musicians played soft strings and singing flutes. The human watched as nobles danced in flowing gowns. Ariane offered her hand, leading him in a simple dance. He stepped carefully to match her rhythm, his eyes on her smiling face. Each misstep became a chance for laughter. Under branches heavy with night-blooming flowers, they moved together. Onlookers admired how they complemented each other royal. Grace with human warmth, blending to cultures in one dance. Through these days of fumbles and lessons, the human's honest spirit shone. Children of court guards whispered in hallways about the kind human. Servants paused in their tasks to offer him small gifts, sweet cakes, or woven bookmarks. Ta-ta. The royal librarian invited him to share stories of Earth's heroes. His tales of courage and kindness inspired noble listeners. Slowly, his presence became a bridge between worlds. He was no longer an outsider, but a valued friend, someone who showed that simple honesty could cross any divide. Princess Ariane watched her chosen human with quiet pride. She remembered their first laugh over wilted greenhouse plants and their soft promise beneath station lights. Here in the palace's grand calm, she saw him grow in confidence and grace. Each day he learned more of her world, and each evening she learned more of his. Together, they built a companionable life-part ceremony. Part laughter, all warmth. As sunlight filtered through the carved doors one morning, the human paused in the hallway. He looked back at the life he had left behind on Earth, and then forward, to the endless possibilities here. Beside him, Ariane took his hand and gave a gentle squeeze. Their journey continued beyond ceremonies and dances, toward a future where two cultures stood united by simple, honest friendship and hope. The next morning, Queen Alara sent a messenger to fetch the human. He found the note waiting by his door. "Your Majesty requests your presence in the royal library." His heart thumped with quiet nerves. He smoothed his jacket and walked through the marble halls, each step echoing softly. And the princess had told him the queen wished to know him better. He hoped he could honor Ariane's faith in him. Inside the library, sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting the shelves of ancient books in soft colors. Tall windows held curtains of woven gold, and the air smelled of old parchment and fresh flowers. Queen Alara sat at a long oak table, her silver hair catching the light. Beside her, a few trusted advisors watched with polite interest. The human bowed low, then rose to stand before the queen, his hands calm at his sides. Elara opened a heavy leather scroll. "Will you share a poem from your world?" she asked, her voice steady. The human looked to the shelves, then back at her, remembered. The small silver token Ariane had given him the entwined symbols of their worlds. He unrolled the scroll and spoke in soft tones, choosing words of hope and friendship he had written for the princess, lines about two suns rising together, seeds planted in strange soil and flowers blooming across wide oceans. His voice was gentle and sure. When he finished, the room held its breath. Even the flickering candles seemed to still. The queen's eyes shone with a quiet wonder. After a pause, she spoke again. "In your poem, you speak of unity. Tell me, what does a true leader look like to you?" The human thought of the princess's kindness and her mother's calm strength. He answered, "A true leader listens. More than speaks. A true leader cares for every person under her rule, like a gardener tending each plant. She helps them grow and stands by them when storms come." His words were simple, yet they filled the room with honest warmth. One advisor leaned forward with a test of his own. "Suppose two villages argue over water. One is small and poor, The other is rich and proud. How would you decide?" The human met his gaze. "I would ask both to speak of their needs," he said. "Then I would find a way to share the water, so both can live. If they trusted me, they would work together to heal the land." He spoke with calm kindness, and his answer felt like a gentle promise. The queen looked at him closely. Lines of doubt softened around her eyes. She remembered her daughter's quiet smile when they spoke of the human on the station. She saw now that his calm heart was strong enough for her royal world. She stood and walked across the floor, her gown whispering over the stone. Without a word, she reached out and touched his arm, a simple gesture. But full of respect, Princess Ariane watched from the doorway, joy bright in her eyes. She saw her mother's change in expression, from careful judgment to open acceptance. The human bowed again, and through the library's tall windows, sunlight wrapped them both in a gentle glow. Ariane slipped forward and joined them, taking the human's other hand. Together, the three formed a quiet circle in that hall of ancient knowledge. As the morning light grew stronger, the human left the library with a lightness in his step. Behind him, Queen Alara stood by the window, looking out at the palace gardens. She pressed a hand to her heart, thinking of the poem's promise of unity. Her doubt had been tested by gentle questions and honest answers. She felt hope for a bond that could heal old divisions. With that, she returned to her throne, ready to welcome a new era for two worlds. In the early morning light, the royal gardens looked pale and sad. The fountains dripped black water. The flowers that once shone like jewels drooped heavy heads. The air felt thick with worry. Princess Ariane and the human walked slowly among the withered blooms, their hearts heavy with concern. Even birds that nested in the trees had fallen silent, as if mourning the fading life. Every day the palace healers tried their best. They mixed healing potions, spoke soft words of magic, and tended the soil. Yet the vines turned brittle, and the bright petals fell to the ground. The staff whispered that something deep in the soil had changed. Even the oldest gardener shook his head in confusion. Princess Ariane pressed her hand to her heart, feeling each petal's loss as her own. The queen called for a council of healers and scholars, gathered in the marble hall, their robes trailing like clouds. Ancient books lay open on the table, pages filled with plant runes. The scholars debated theories, but their voices grew tense. Each scholar's frown deepened, and shadows gathered in the corners of the grand hall. No one had an answer that could save the gardens. Tension spread through the palace like a storm cloud. Servants moved with quiet dread, afraid to speak with hope. The princess watched from her room, her heart aching at every fallen leaf. The human felt the weight of her sorrow. He touched Ariane's hand gently as they passed a wilting rose, sharing her sadness. He knew that if the gardens died, the kingdom would lose a part of its soul. Late one evening, he knelt beside a broken branch and pressed his hand to the soil. He remembered his home on Earth, where simple compost tea could revive tired plants. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, thinking of fresh rain and rich earth. A quiet idea bloomed in his mind, bright as new spring. He dared to imagine healing where magic had failed. The next morning, he approached Queen Alara and spoke softly. He offered a plan to brew compost tea with local herbs. His voice was steady, but his heart fluttered with nerves. He explained how earth gardeners use this mixture to feed roots and clear toxic buildup. He asked for a chance to try, no matter how small. Some scholars scoffed at his words. They laughed at the human's simple method. They said magic and chance had more power than soil alone. Palace advisors frowned and exchanged doubtful glances. Even a few gardeners whispered that his idea was too humble for a royal garden. Their laughter rang through the courtyards like falling stones. The princess grasped her mother's hand and pleaded softly. Her eyes shone with trust in the humans. Kindness. Queen Alara paused, her mind torn between tradition and her daughter's faith. At last she nodded. Let him try, she said in a clear voice. All who heard felt hope stir in their chests. In that choice, hope rose like morning sun across the pale sky. Through the night the human worked by lantern light. He mixed compost with herbs, stirring gently as he hummed a soft tune. He knelt beside each plant, pouring the warm tea at their roots. His hands trembled with care, as if he tended newborn lives. Every pore felt like a promise to the garden and to Ariane. By dawn, the first miracle appeared. Tiny green shoots pushed. Through dark soil, the leaves looked brighter, as if the plants had drank a sleeping spell and woken fresh. The gardeners who watched gasped in wonder. They bent close to touch the new growth, their eyes wide with disbelief and hope. The air felt lighter, as if the garden itself was breathing again. Princess Ariane rushed into the gardens, her gown brushing soft petals. She found the human kneeling in the dew, a gentle smile on his face. Together, they walked along the rows of vibrant flowers, their hands brushing stalks that stood tall. The air filled with sweet fragrance once more, and hearts felt light again. Laughter fluttered through the leaves like butterflies. Queen Alara arrived in the golden light, her eyes shining with pride. She spoke across the marble path, praising the human's care and the garden's return. The crowd bowed in respect, their doubts washed away by new life. The humans stood beside Ariane, their hands joined. In that moment, two worlds felt united by hope and simple kindness. Deep in the palace's greenhouse, moonlight filtered through curved glass as the human moved among the plants. Dew clung to broad leaves, and the air smelled of damp earth. He worked with steady care, pruning broken stems and testing the soil. With gentle fingers, each night he carried a small lantern so he could see every sprout. Under his careful hands, even the weakest shoots stood taller. The quiet glow of candles echoed his calm respect for life. One morning, gardeners gathered around him. They wore simple tunics and held tools in hand. The human shared Earth's compost tea recipe, demonstrating how to brew it with palace herbs. He spoke in a soft voice while stirring a wooden bowl. The gardeners watched with wide eyes as he poured. The mixture at the roots. Tiny leaves unfolded like magic. The gardeners nodded in wonder and began to help, working side by side with the human until the first light of dawn nearby. The palace maids paused their duties to watch him work. He greeted each with a warm nod and a gentle smile. He asked about their families and listened with true care. One maid laughed softly when he forgot their custom for offering tea. Whoa, 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 whoa. He bowed his head with a sheepish grin and tried again. She giggled, and soon all the maids relaxed. They brought him fresh water and sweet pastries, grateful for his simple kindness. Some guards stopped by to watch his gentle work. A young guard trembled with worry when a heavy pot broke. The human knelt beside him, placing a hand on his arm. He spoke softly. "Mistakes help us learn." Together they replaced the pot and refilled soil. The guard's shoulders eased, and relief shone in his eyes. Word of this kindness spread quickly through the palace, reminding everyone that caring hearts could heal more than royal edicts. Gift baskets began appearing at the human's door. One morning, he found fresh flowers and jars of honey from palace gardeners. Another day, a scholar left him books on botany translated into his language. A group of cooks presented sweetbreads they made with palace honey. The human accepted each gift with a humble bow, his eyes warm with gratitude. These acts of goodwill filled the palace with gentle hope, as everyone felt a part of this quiet change. From her private window, Queen Alara watched the human's work. She saw how he spoke with gardeners, and how his calm voice eased their fears. She noticed the gentle smiles he shared with servants and the grateful bows he received. Each day her doubt softened as she witnessed these acts of care. She realized that true strength could come from simple kindness. In her heart, she felt a growing respect for this human who had won more than the gardens. He had won her trust. One afternoon, Queen Alara entered the greenhouse unannounced. She moved among the vibrant plants, careful not to disturb the human. At work, he looked up and bowed deeply, surprised but calm. She offered him a soft smile and said, "Thank you for saving our gardens." The human touched his chest and said, "It was my honor." Ariane stood beside him, her eyes shining with pride. Adla, Queen, placed a hand on the human's shoulder, an unspoken promise of support. As sunset painted the sky in soft pinks, the human and Princess Ariane walked through the green passage. They held hands and spoke of dreams for their two worlds. The human said he would teach more earth ways, and Arian promised to share more palace wisdom. They paused at a fountain where water danced in golden light. Arian leaned on his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her. Together they had shown that kindness and hope could grow anywhere, uniting hearts like flowers in bloom. The palace glowed with new life as two cultures grew closer each day. In the pale light of dawn, the palace courtyard filled with soft music and gentle chatter. Streams of sunlight fell across polished marble, turning it to gold. Banners of both worlds fluttered in the warm breeze, Earth's blue and green beside, alien silver and rose. Guests gathered around a long dais where Queen Alara, Princess Ariane, and the humans stood together. The air felt full of promise, as if two worlds held their breath for this moment. Princess Ariane stepped forward, her simple rose gown shining like morning light. She held the human's hand, her smile steady and warm. With a clear voice she spoke of their journey, of lonely halls on the research station, of shared laughter over wilted plants, of careful lessons in courtly grace. She spoke of the human's kindness that had healed gardens and hearts alike. Each word felt like petals falling on eager ears. Then the human bowed before the queen and the princess. His dark jacket was simple but clean, his eyes bright with hope. He spoke in gentle tones, praising the beauty of this world and the honor of joining it. He vowed to stand beside Ariane as a friend, a partner, and a bridge between worlds. He promised to listen like a gardener, to care like a healer, and to love with open hands. Queen Alara watched quietly, her silver hair catching the sun. She had tested him in poems and debates and watched him tend the garden night after night. She saw how courtiers warmed to his honest spirit, and how servants found courage in his gentle words. Now she rose, her voice clear and strong, and declared that the human was not only welcome, but honored. She placed a simple silver circlet on his head. It matched Ariane's pearl pin, binding their worlds in a single symbol. As the circlet settled on the human's brow, the crowd broke into soft applause. Trumpets sounded, their notes bright and hopeful. Children from Earth and alien worlds danced between columns, weaving ribbons of blue and rose. Gardeners offered fresh blooms, and cooks handed out sweet cakes that melted like clouds on the tongue. Servants bowed and smiled, no longer distant but part of this shared joy. Through the courtyard, music swelled into a festival of light. Nobles and common folk mingled, speaking words of greeting and wonder. An earth musician played a simple tune on a wooden flute, and an alien dancer moved with graceful steps among them. Laughter rose like bird song. Each note felt like proof that, too, cultures could meet not in war, but in celebration. Later, under a sky turned pink by sunset, Queen Alara invited the human and Princess Ariane to walk in the royal gardens. They strolled along paths lit by glowing lamps, petals from two worlds drifting around them. The human paused by a newly planted tree, a gift from the queen, its roots in both earth soil and alien clay. He placed a hand on the bark and felt warmth flow through him. Ariane leaned close and whispered, "We have grown something beautiful here." At that soft glow, the queen spoke once more, "May this union bring peace and hope to all who see it." She placed her hands on her daughter's and the human's shoulders. Ariane's eyes filled with tears of joy, and the human bowed his head in quiet thanks. Round them, two worlds joined in a single heartbeat, one of friendship, trust, and gentle wonder. As night fell, lanterns floated into the sky, carrying wishes from noble and servant alike. Princess Ariane and the humans stood hand in hand, watching lights drift toward distant stars. Queen Alara stood beside them, her doubt fully melted into pride. In that moment, the palace held not just a marriage, but a promise that kindness and hope could bloom anywhere, uniting hearts across the cosmos for all time.